this? У нас никого нет еще. Yeah? Oh, okay. Okay. Hi, everyone. I don't see you, but I want to see your comments maybe. So first of all, my name is Nastya, and I'm from Kharkiv. And I think that your next certain... I don't see you, but I want to see your comments maybe. So first of all, my name is Nastya, and I'm from Kharkiv. Okay. So actually, I want to see your comments. What cities are you from? What teachers I'm going to talk to today? Write me, please. Okay, maybe it's a secret. Why I see that there is only one person? Oh, Tanya is from Kharkiv, so nice. Okay, so we have a teacher from Kharkiv, and maybe we have teachers from other cities. Oh, okay, one more teacher from Kharkiv. Yeah, Kharkiv. Nice to see you. Okay, I think that actually we can start, and today we are going to talk about delayed error correction. Last week, I think that you remember something that Vika told you. Yeah, she's also from Kharkiv, and she told you about instant error correction. So today we're speaking about delayed one, but first of all, I want you to refresh some information in your memory and actually check if you remember anything from our last webinar. So first, I want to tell you actually what mistakes or what things we need to correct. So the first one, you need to understand the difference between errors and mistakes. So there are errors. It means that students can use the incorrect language, or they make these mistakes because of the lack of knowledge. But also, students can make mistakes. Usually, they are accidents. They can be slips of the tongue, and we, of course, can make these mistakes in our native language, yeah, in our Russian or Ukrainian. So these mistakes we usually don't need to correct because students understand or maybe even don't notice that it is a slip of the tongue or they've made this mistake. And of course, if you're working, for example, with upper intermediate level, if they say he go to school, of course they know that it's correct to say he goes to school, but it's a slip of the tongue, so it happens with everyone. So we need to correct just errors, the mistakes that are because of the lack of knowledge. And then when you know that your students make errors, yeah, that they have some errors, you need to decide what way to choose. And actually what to choose, instant or delayed error correction. You need to correct on the spot if your students make the mistake with their target language, when they practicing the form, so you base on the accuracy, not on the fluency. It means that if you practice, for example, present simple with them, and if they need to say that he goes to school every day, but they say he go, yeah, then in this case, you need to correct this mistake on the spot, yeah, so that the student understands that it is really a mistake. Also, some of the learners can request and ask you to correct. Yes, they can ask you, like, teacher, tell me if I'm correct or not, or if it is a mistake or not. In this case, you also need to answer on the spot. And the last thing that you need to correct is when your students are saying something, but it is not making sense at all, and other partners here or other students can't understand at all what the person is talking about. In this case, you can help your student to build the correct sentence. In other cases, we need to choose the delayed error correction. So when you're focused on the fluency and when your students need to practice some new grammar, yeah, and it's some kind of free practice of freshly learned grammar or vocabulary, and your game is to work on their fluency. And if students have general conversations with you and with other students, so if they're just speaking about some films that they watched and so on. So if we see, I have some examples for you of the tasks that are actually which aims are to practice the fluency. So the first task you may see is just to work in pairs, role play the situation. It means that students have some roles, they need to build a conversation, and of course you don't need to stop your students every time when they make the mistake. You need to listen carefully, and only after they finish the task you need to draw their attention to some errors that they've made. The second task you may see, it is based on the topic of wishes or regrets, and again students here need to answer the questions or tell the examples of the situations, or tell what they want to change in their life, and so on. So again, is the example of the fluency tasks. And the last example is from elementary, the book for elementary students. And here they need to like describe the animal for their partners, and they need to ask questions and answer the questions. So again, your students already know what grammar they need to use, and they already know the structure, but their task is to use it freer and to practice using it in the live conversation. So in this case, again, you don't correct it on the spot. So when you know that your students are working on fluency, and you need to correct their mistakes not on the spot but after, then you need to follow some procedure, and you need to start making notes of what your students are saying, if you hear some mistakes, of course. So what you need to make notes of. The first one is the mistakes with the target grammar or vocabulary. So you are learning present simple, then try to note only the mistakes that are connected with usage of present simple. Then errors with language from previous lessons, that is still an issue. So some of your students can make mistakes of the topics that you have already passed with them and you have already learned with them, but they still have this mistake. So you need to draw your students' attention that it is a mistake, it is an error. And then problems that are shared by multiple students. So if all your students, or like a part of your students, are making the same mistake, it's already the hint for you, just the thing that you need to make notes of. So when you make notes, you don't focus only on the negative sentences and on the errors that your students make. Also try to focus on something where they have some success. So try to note some of the sentences that are correct, because when you give them the incorrect sentences, you can give them also correct sentences, and when they see that it's correct, you can say that, guys, I'm proud of you, and your students will be happy that they learned something and they have used it in the right way. So just you need to praise your students and award them somehow. Okay, when you are making notes, you can face some problems while making notes, because you're working with people, and it's not always so easy to make notes of the mistakes that your students make. So the first problem is that teachers can't get their students to hear them and to note their mistakes. And also this problem goes together with that teachers don't want to disrupt the communication activity. So to solve this problem, if you can't get near enough to your students, for example, I know if you work with, if you have a lot of students and they are in not very big classroom, then the easiest way out is just to regroup them all the time, so that they change their partners, they change their places, and are able to hear different students. Also, you can ask students not to sit, but to stand up and speak while they're standing. It also can help you to monitor, to go around the students, to monitor and not to disrupt their communication activity. And also, if you look at the problem number two, I really want to emphasize that it's important not to come too close to your students and not to make them feel uncomfortable or worried, yeah, because when students hear and when students see that the teacher is listening to them and also is making notes of what they are talking about, yeah, they can understand that they are making some mistakes, and then they can speak they can stop speaking, yeah, or they can be afraid of speaking at all. So just don't come very close to your students. Choose the leave some space for them so that they feel comfortable. Also, the next problem is that you can't make out exactly what they're saying when your students are mumbling, yeah, and they are just all speaking at the same time. So just try to, I know the technique, yeah, that is called selective listening, when you are focusing your attention only on one pair of students and you're trying to catch what exactly one pair of student is saying, yeah, or just one student is talking about. It can help you to hear, yeah, some mistakes or actually your student's speech while everyone is speaking around. Then some teachers complain that they can't hear any errors. So it can be either if the students are really smart, yeah, or it can happen when the students or just when a teacher doesn't hear errors because of the noise. So you know what to do if it is noise, but if your students don't make mistakes and you don't hear any errors, then you can anticipate them. So it means that you know what topics can be problematic for your students. So just write down some sentences that are wrong, yeah, for them, and suggest them correcting these mistakes. And then teachers can say that they can't write down all the students' errors. Here you need to know that you don't need to correct all the errors and write down all the errors. So we've already discussed with you what errors we need to write, but I want to say again what you don't need to correct and what errors you don't need to note. So the first one is slips of the tongue. The second one, mistakes that don't correspond to students' level. For example, if you're working with elementary students and they make a mistake in using, I know, present perfect that they haven't learned yet, so you don't need to correct this mistake because they will not understand. They will ask you why we have this mistake, what is the mistake, and then you will have to explain the whole topic of present perfect for them. So there is no need, it's very time consuming, so just skip this mistake. And you don't need to correct the errors that aren't common and were heard only once. So if you hear that one student makes some mistake and then you hear that this student says the correct sentence, yeah, using the same grammar or vocabulary structure, then don't focus your attention on this. Just choose problems that are more spread among your students. So when you know what to correct, yeah, how to correct, actually not how to correct, but when you have all the mistakes of your students, you need to choose the interesting way, yeah, or the suitable way how to correct these mistakes. And now I will suggest you some ways that I usually use on my lessons and that some other teachers use on their lessons. So let's start with simplest ones. So the first way, and is the easiest one that we usually do in our lessons, is to board their wrong sentences. So you just write them on the board, ask students to work with you open class, yeah, or give them time to work in pairs. They decide which sentences are correct and which are not. And then open class, you get their feedback and you discuss it open class. Also, a good way for your students is to board the mistakes and categorize them. It means that you can write on your board the categories such as prepositions, yeah, wrong preposition, wrong word, or grammar mistake. It will help your students to focus on the problem, yeah, and it can help your students correct the mistake faster. And after that, they will have some structure in their head, yeah, and they will memorize the topic, yeah, or this mistake better. Again, you can correct it open class, or they can do it in pairs. But if you keep giving error correction in the same way all the time, the process quickly becomes stale and students already know what you're going to do, yeah, and the process is predictable. So sometimes we need to omit this predictability and choose some other interesting ways for our students how to correct their own mistakes. So if you feel the lack of time, yeah, if you don't have much time and you are correcting the mistakes between two parts of your lesson, for example, then what I use with my students is we have our chat on Telegram or on Viber, and I write the wrong sentences to our chat. I send them and ask students to work in their pairs, and when they are working in their pairs, they are discussing the sentences, and they're discussing the sentences, they're correcting them, and they're writing down the correct answers and sending these answers to our common chat, so that all students can see the answers of other players, and they can compare their answers, yeah, because we don't need to write it down on the board and so on. Everyone sees them on their screens. So it's very quickly to check, and then it's very quickly to give them feedbacks and quickly to decide which sentences are correct and which are not correct. Also, this way works very cool when you, for example, know, yeah, that your students make the same mistake all the time, and you want to focus your students' attention on this problem. And you can, for example, when you're sitting at home, yeah, when you are chatting with your students sometimes, so you can send them one sentence with the most common mistake and ask them, like, guys, what's wrong here? And they use the correct variants of the ideas, and you choose the correct variant together. You don't spend so much time but on your students' mistakes. So if you write the sentence 30 seconds, then your students discuss, then you just check what they have written to you, yeah, and then you are just choosing the correct option together with the students. But also, there are some other interesting ways that can help you and your students correct their mistakes. So the first one is competition. It means that your students can work together in their pairs or in their groups. They look at the sentences that are already on the board, and they just compete, yeah, so they try to correct the sentences faster, and then they give you their answers and get points for that. For example, you can say, like, sentence number 1, your students raise their hands, the first hand you ask students if their answer is correct, then this group of students or this pair of students gets 1 point, for example. Then, more time-consuming but very interesting way is that on sentences. So here you have the part of the task, yeah, so you have the column with wrong and correct sentences. Then you have the second column with bets and new total. So your students give them the worksheet. Your students can work in their pairs. They can have some amount of money, for example, suggest them £1,000, and they read the sentences. If they know for sure that there is a mistake in the sentence and they know how to correct it, they can bet the larger sum of money. So they choose the sentences, yes, they divide this £1,000 between the sentences, and then they need to correct them. After that, you need to explain for your students that if their answer is correct, their new total sum of money will double. So it means that if, for example, the students correct the first sentence and they bet £50, it means that at the end, if their answer is right, they will 100 pounds. So it's very entertaining way to correct their mistakes, and actually students usually like it, yeah, because it's connected with money and it's connected with some kind of competition again. So also you can arrange the sentence auction. It means that you can first solve the sentence. So it means that you write the sentences down or show them on the screen. Can buy sentences for some amount of money. Again, you need to give them fixed amount of money. So when they buy the sentence, they need to correct the sentence, again, with their peers or in their groups. And then at the end, if their correction is right, again, they will have some reward. Also, it can be a mingling exercise when you write one sentence on a separate card, spread these cards among your students. They need to mingle, show their sentences that they have, and discuss where the mistake is, or if the sentence is correct or not, and collaborate, yeah, and correct the sentence. Then it can be a group discussion. So you again write each sentence on the separate card, give the pile of cards to your students, to the group of students. They take a card, look at the sentences, discuss together, and then when they finish, yeah, when they have corrected all the sentences, they need to exchange their cards with other groups of students and look at the cards again and check if their partners, yeah, from other groups have correct answers or not. And they can use another color of pen or pencils to correct the sentences again, for example, or to underline something that wasn't corrected. After that, they exchange their cards again, and you show the open class feedback on your board, for example, or on the PPT, and check the tasks, and the students can check themselves. And also the last one that I want to tell you about is dictation exercise. Of course, it can't work with students of lower levels. It's okay to start with intermediate levels, yeah, or maybe in the second part of pre-intermediate level. When you have made notes of your students' errors, you need to dictate the sentences with errors. And your students need to write down not the sentences, the exact sentence that you are dictating for them, but the sentence that is already correct. For example, you dictate for them like, she have traveled to different countries. The idea for your students, so the idea that your students need to, the thing that your students need to do is to write, she has been to different countries. And then when you finish your dictation, your students can compare their answers in their peers or in their groups. And at the end, again, you give them open class feedback and discuss all the sentences together. So it's a really cool way, and students usually love it because they have time to think. Also, they improve their listening skills, and actually it helps them to notice their mistakes themselves, yeah. And when they talk, for example, with other students and with their group mates, they can notice their mistakes and hear mistakes of other students. So it's really cool way to help them notice mistakes that they make and that their partners make. So, but you can tell me that, Nastya, we have tried different ways, but our students keep making the same mistakes even after we've dealt with them a million times. Yeah, guys, I really feel your pain, and I know it really happens very often, and my students have the same problem. So the only thing that you can do is just to give them good feedbacks and to give them from time to time the worksheets, maybe with mistakes, yeah, with sentences that have mistakes, and give them more time to work on these mistakes. So don't forget about feedbacks, and don't forget about drills. Especially drills are really important if you work with low levels, yeah, and when your students make a mistake, you ask them just to change the sentences and say something about themselves. Yeah, like if you have the sentence, I know she wake up at 6 o'clock, and you have already corrected, and your students already know that it's correct to say she wakes up at 6 o'clock. Yeah, then you can ask your students to change the sentence into the negative or interrogative one, or they can tell the information about themselves, or for example, tell the information about their relatives, like my mother wakes up at 7 o'clock every day, or they wake up at, I don't know, at 10 o'clock because they don't need to go to university, and so on. So try to drill, and don't forget to give feedbacks to your students. So actually, that's it. Thank you very much for your attention, guys. I believe that you will be experts in corrected mistakes. And if you have any questions, I'm ready to answer all of them. So just write them. From your experience, what is the most efficient way of delayed error correction? Okay, actually, I love the ways when my students compete, because when they compete, first of all, they work faster, and they have some extra interest, yeah. And when they need to earn money, for example, for correcting sentences, it really works very nice. So it's fun for them, and again, they work, they collaborate. So actually, it's really cool task. I try to do it from time to time with my students. I have some, like fake I spread when they correct this, the answer is right. I give them money at the end, they count, yeah, and I can give some small prize to the group of students which has more money, like some candies or some paper clips and so on. Okay, cool idea with dictation. Thank you very much. Yeah, it really works so nice. Yeah, I've tried it with my upper intermediate students, and they really loved it. Yeah, and it's really interesting. Okay, I like the dictation idea too. Okay, and I like the dictation one. Okay, cool. I also like the dictation one. Yeah, so from time to time you can vary your ideas not to make your students bored. And actually, I hope that our webinar was quite interesting for you and quite useful. So I wish you to have good lessons with your students, have fun, and remember that teachers rule the world. Thank you very much.